hollows and those sort of trees, and you have ignorance of politicians and people tell you that, oh, they'll just fly away. And I said, yeah, but their hollows aren't going to fly away with them because you've actually fell them. I said, so, you know, our story of the owls is the story of the trees as well, so we fight really hard to protect every tree.
And yeah, they're known for their nest site fidelity, so they do usually go back to the same nest tree each year. With Mikey, Stevie and Mikey were born in the same tree, but then we had a lot of issues going on down in Bowles Creek Valley, an increase in land clearing and development, and they did move further down into the Cheltenham area from Beecroft.
So they moved from an Angophora hollow, which we call Mikey's hollow, and they're in a Sydney peppermint. It's a Sydney peppermint one, isn't it? Yeah.
So we'll have to see where they go.
And listen, it's not just developers in that clearing. I mean, we had an issue with the national parks who were backburning under a tree while Mikey was still in the hollow. We've had they come along. They don't know what's actually happening in the area, and they just do what they think that they should do. And you go, hey, wait a minute. Unless it's up to people like residents in Moulton Road, which is in Beecroft and Cheltenham, to actually, you know, bring the attention to the national parks. They don't really know what's happening in their backyard. So, you know, it's really important to be vigilant.
Yes, and the females normally 2 eggs, sometimes 1 but barely 3 in a clutch, and the eggs are laid about 4 days apart. And as we've said, the breeding practice normally starts in March, April, and occurs in May. I don't think I'm going to be able to get that call up, but Michael, can you do a woohoo for us?
Oh, you do a better woohoo than me. Woohoo! Yeah, brilliant.
Okay. Now with the, and Jean has actually seen birds mate. Did you want to have a little chat about that, or?
There's probably not that much to say.
It was over pretty quick, wasn't it?
It was over in about 9 seconds.
9 seconds, not that she was out.
Wasn't Barnaby Joyce, was it?
So, with the incubation, 38 days, with the female keeping the eggs at the right temperature. They're about the size of a chook egg, 4 to 5 centimetres in diameter. And during that incubation period, the male does all of the hard work. So he does the hunting, brings the food back to the female at dusk, and she'll fly out and have a bit of a stretch of her wings. And both parents are really quite protective of the hollow at this time.
She's got that's a flying fox.
Yeah.
Prey. You could a bit dark there, but that red bit's its flesh.
Yeah, and so tired that the eyes are asleep and she's still holding the food. Okay. So with the nesting period in July and August, that's when we've got the little chick pecking its way out of the shell, and the female will stay with the bird in the hollow for about 55 days. And with all that time incubating and nesting, they'll often get a brood patch on their chest where all their feathers will wear off. The male continues to bring the food to the hollow, and that'll be shared with the chick. And they're again vulnerable during this time. You can see like all of the cockatoos and rosellas, and it's a real noisy nest site. And the first sign of the chick is about 8 weeks, and you can see here little Mikey poking his eye out of the hollow for the first time.
So can you do a trill sound?
I can't do a trill.
It's a bit high pitched.
No. Do a trill?
No, it's definitely too high pitched for a male voice. So you'll have to give it a go. Maybe Gina.
So with the fledging, about 4 weeks after they've appeared at the nest site, the chicks will fledge, and they do take a bit of work to get those wings going. And once they've fledged, they don't go back to the hollow. But Mikey, being the celebrity that he is, made 3 attempts to fledge. 3 nights in a row, and he finally got it right on the 3rd time. So you can see Michael's been here, looking at him peeking out, and it's like a sort of corkscrew getting those wings up, and then he put them back down, but he got it right at the end. growing up, it really doesn't take them too long to be the same size as their parent. You can see here Mikey with Dad Fish Cake. How old would he have been there, Michael?
Oh, a couple of months really, wouldn't he?
Yeah, about
maybe 4 months. Yeah.
So they lose all of their fluffy white down and they develop their chevrons. And as I said, they quickly grow to the size of their parents. But they'll continue to be fed by their parents until they can learn to hunt for themselves. And we think about 3 or 4 months where Michael's seen the bird with, instead of bits and pieces, the owl's actually there with
yeah, I think probably a bit longer. I think about 6 months. I think the 4 months they only have pieces, which is what their parents give them. You know, they rip off a drumstick and they give it to their little offspring to sit on for the day. But I'd say about 6 months.
6 months, okay. And they've got to be independent and find their own territory before the next breeding season starts. So at this stage we'd be seeing Abby and Archie flying off to get ready for the new year.
Yeah, I've actually still see the chicks with the dad. What have you seen, Gina?
I've seen them with the chicks with Mum once.
Is that the shots you sent? Yeah, it looked like the mother, yeah. Because I haven't seen the Shiva for a while, but I've seen the father and the 2 chicks. And yeah.
And often on the
yeah. So usually about, what is it, about 7 months?
It'll be March.
They usually move on then because the parents are actually going to probably mate again, so they have to make room and move them on.
So Mikey's friends in Bowles Creek Valley, we're pretty lucky to have even wallabies down there, so close to the city, but it seems like there's wallabies everywhere, jumping down the Sydney Harbour Bridge, trying to get the Manly ferry, was it? So that shouldn't be a surprise to any of us. But Mikey's bestie is Gabby the Gang Gang cockatoo, and Gabby is listed as an endangered species in the Hornsby and Ku-ring-gai local council area. They're breeding prolifically down in Canberra, but this is the last known actual breeding population in Sydney in Bowles Creek Valley, and they're very difficult to find at the moment. And neighbours who have them, coming onto their balconies in the afternoons and, being hand-fed and, taking videos. But for the last 2-3 years, they're very hard to find. And both councils have combined to run a campaign for people to identify them. And you can see the distinctive, it's always the males that are the attractive in the bird species. Yeah. So you can see the male gang here with the scarlet crest. And head. And apparently they're left-handed as well, but I can't testify.
That's right. Who said that? Where'd that come from?
Yeah, that was from bird life, that they use their left claw to hold their food.
Well, I know the cockatoos do. So do all, because I actually looked at the silver crest cockatoo.
Does anybody know? No. Anyway,
Most parrots.
Yeah.
The other day, with 2 cockatoos side by side, both with food in their belly.
Yeah, I noticed that as well.
Yeah. Now, in terms of enemies, statistically about 8 out of 10 of these birds don't reach adulthood. Some of the issues we've got are birds attacking the nest site, and we know with Mikey's Hollow that in the off-season it's a little bit like Airbnb, where the cockatoo family moves in and then they move out for the PAL season. We've got feral cats and dogs, and I guess you could put foxes into that category as well. But roadkill is one of the biggest problems that we have, 10% of the population annually. And just Saturday, Peg McDonald from High Ground Raptors had a bird going down to her that had been 4 days on the road, and nobody had picked it up. So I haven't heard what the outcome of that is. Electrocution on power lines, but as Michael and I have said, the destruction of trees is one of the biggest problems. We've seen 30,000 go in our area. A lot of that was to do with an Epping to Thornley third track, also the Northwest Railway development and the 1050 code. So basically it's about a third of the trees that have been lost in Hornsby Shire have been due to development, a third with the 1050 code, and another third through just, the tree protection orders, which have just been strengthened. So that was, we lost 15,000 trees, about 3% of the canopy in 1 year. We were leading across Sydney. I think there was another council that might have been ahead of us, but that's been a pretty massive blow. And if it had continued at that rate, we probably wouldn't have had much of the tree canopy left by 2034. So when we see...
What's the 1050 code?
The 1050 code it was because of the bushfires in the Blue Mountains, so that people could clear shrubs within 10 metres and trees within 30 metres, or am I 50 metres? The other way around, sorry. So that was introduced into suburbs like Beecroft.
Well, up here was, people were in the whole area.
Suburbs like Beecroft and Cheltenham, where people took it as an opportunity to get rid of trees that were dropping leaves, that were making a mess that they didn't want to see.
Yeah, what they did was they designated areas where I live in central Cheltenham to be bushfire prone. We've never had a bushfire. I've been there for 20 years. There's not going to ever be a bushfire there. And they brought in this 1050 code, and it just covered the whole area, Shire. I think only 10% of the Shire was left out. And people were just falling trees every day. You'd hear this cacophony of chainsaws just going down, tree after tree after tree. Now, it wasn't... Luckily, it was residents who, created the outcry all over northern Sydney. People like Corinne Fisher. I don't know if you know Corinne Fisher. She's excellent. And just in groups up here, I went to a number of protests at Pittwater in front of Rob Stokes' office and Mike Baird's office protesting the 1050 code. Listen, that people power actually got that wound right back. And, we're seeing that now with things happening with the West Connect. I mean, it's people power that's going to stop that sort of thing happening where they're just demolishing homes, they're demolishing trees left, right and centre. And we're just going to be a city of apartments and trees unless we all just stand up and just say enough is enough. And unfortunately, regardless where you politically lie, at the moment, this New South Wales state government has done a lot of damage to Sydney.
So some of the things that we can do as our enthusiasts is to make sure that we don't take our flash cameras and torches within 30 metres of the roost sites. And while they're not normally considered aggressive, they have been known to swoop to defend their young. So do be careful. And we just talk about the tree, do you think, as an example of...
Yeah, I don't mind.
Yeah, because the tree here, this was a white mahogany, and it was 140 years old, estimated date. And that tree was in the back of the garden clinic on Beecroft Road, where Graham Ross has his operation. And that was felled just to make room to squeeze in a few more apartments.
Yeah, and that tree doesn't it? That photo doesn't do it justice. I shot that in three. I had to shoot that in three separate images and then join it together in Photoshop. But it was actually massive, and it was so big you could hear the whole ecosystem within that tree. The amount of bees that were in there, microbats and things like that. I mean,
possums, cockatoos.
Now the interesting thing with that tree. Residents got out and fought hard to protect that tree. Now, council did listen, and they went back to the developer and they said, listen, we're going to allow you to go up one more floor from 5 to 6 if you actually leave that as an open space and keep that tree. Now, that developer, what happened was David Shoebridge actually took that issue into Parliament. And on that day when he knew it was going to be tabled in Parliament, that developer came and ring-barked that tree and poisoned it. So it didn't matter what was decided, he wanted to get rid of that tree, and if the government had decided that there would be a stay of execution on the tree, well, it was going to die anyway. So, and we documented all that. Now that was a fairly big battle to do that. And that was devastating to see that. Not only did they cut, the way they cut that down was brutal in itself with these big bloody machines. And then the next day, they just left it on the ground. No workers on there, because I went back to see what the carnage was, and then I could see these birds coming in. Obviously, the birds, weren't harmed when it actually got cut down, but there were birds actually within that tree on the ground. Now this is just the sheer bloody mindedness of these developers that they'll just take out anything. That tree was there before any white fella came to Beecroft. And you know, humans have this thing that only they've got a right in this world. Well, they don't. Animals have a right to exist in this world, so do trees. And I'll tell you what, if the bees disappear, well, the last laugh will be on them, because I'll tell you what, the humans won't be around.
Yeah, the thing that the developer didn't know was that the Ross family had taken seedlings from the tree for quite a
That's the good bit.
Yeah, for quite a period of time, knowing that the outcome probably wasn't going to be good, and they grew them as saplings. There were hundreds of them. We've now got one growing in our backyard, which is doing really well. And every year we plant one of those saplings in the Beecroft Village Green on Picnic for Tree, or we call it Picnic for Trees.
It's National Tree Day.
And it's National Tree Day, which is the last Sunday in July. So there are 3 there now, and they're all doing really well.
Well, the first one's amazing. It's grown really, really high, and it looks healthy. So its offsprings are
everywhere. There's hundreds of them now.
But it's such a pity, because that had hundreds of years left in it. I mean, it was so healthy. Even when you could see where they cut it down, there was no disease in any branch. You know, and you look at that, and that's why we use that as an example. I mean, you know, that's actually in the heart of suburbia, but to actually lose that, that's a community asset. The thing is that I say to residents, you may have a tree on your property, fine, you're just the custodian. The tree is actually a community asset. But I also do believe, and I've approached council about this, that there's a tree fund created where you help residents financially to maintain that tree, whether it's to bring an arborist in a year to check out that tree, to see, you know, because the one thing that you know, if it drops a branch, the first thing that a resident's going to say, I want the whole tree gone. Now, if those trees are actually looked after, and you know, they're given a clean bill of health, and there's a financial cost in that, and I think as a community and as a ratepayer, I'd be happy to pay extra on my rates to help these residents who have big trees, who would normally want to cut them down because they, you know, because of the expense or whatever, and you know, try and maintain it. But trees are a community asset.
Okay, so back to the owls and BirdLife Australia. Just talking about the citizen scientists. So there are a lot of people who give up their time to, you know, walk through the national park and to take photographs and record it and send the information, you know, through to the Powerful Owl Project. And our group's been going now for 5 years, and that wouldn't be possible without BirdLife Australia. And their funding runs out at the end of June this year, and they have to apply again. So any support that you can give them on that, you know, in social media or media, would be really well deserved. Already we've got 238 birds extinct or threatened or near threatened. We don't really have a very proud environmental record as far as extinction goes, and that's not talking about animals or flora. And we just need to preserve the trees and help conserve these remaining powerful owl populations, which are doing better in urban areas. They're coming from the outskirts because of the massive clearing into urban backyards. So with our first book, we donated $5 from every copy that we sold. That was over $2,000 to BirdLife Australia, and we did that in January of last year. And there we are, handing over our little Bendigo bank check. Has anybody got questions that they want to ask before we have a bit of a break?
Yes,
Yes.
2 questions. Sorry, I didn't. You said it. So how big was the valley? Was it 350?
About 350 hectares.
So
yeah.
that is just. I mean, I'm just always trying to sort of compare with our Narrabeen Labool catchment, which is 55 square kilometers. So yours is really quite small in comparison. That's
Yeah,
like sort of
and the main when we
3.5.
yeah, and like when we talk about Bowles Creek Valley, there's one particular road there which is Moulton Road, and it's been developed over time, but down the end of the street, which backs onto the national park, It was virgin. It was virgin bush.
Yeah,
And-
Files Creek Valley joins onto National Park, so it goes from that 350, but it does become a bigger thing. There is that corridor that joins it on, and we're trying to get an annex back to the National Park.
I'm not wanting, that's not at all the question of, that's not the emphasis of my question. It is just because for us, you know, here, lots of people find it very hard to estimate how large an area is, and so therefore, you know, I just wanted to sort of, and I actually didn't Google it myself, to be quite honest, to check that I'm right, correct with something. The other thing is with the white mahogany, is it eucalyptus umbra or what eucalyptus is that actually? You know?
I've got it written down, so I'll tell you later. Yeah. So with Files Creek Valley, the Files Creek Valley Union was established about 50 years ago, a group of local residents trying to stop development. And in 1988 there was a commission of inquiry. The current vice president of the Files Creek Valley Union took a year out to write submissions and to prepare her case for that. And the conclusion was that it should have been saved and held by council and retained for conservation. That didn't happen, and it continued to be zoned as residential, but there was never any building on it. And then in 2014 there was a subdivision that went through. So that was for 20,000 square metres to develop that into 5 McMansions basically. Now that went to the back and forth from, you know, council meetings and ultimately ended up in the Land and Environment Court, and it was approved. But the community did get back about 10,000 square metres of land. Unfortunately, most of that is under power lines. So there's going to be massive, you know, there will be continue to be massive, you know, clearing under those off-grid power lines. It's also, you know, in a bushfire prone area, so the APZs around these homes are enormous. If you go down the street, it's incredibly narrow, so if fire trucks need to get in and residents need to get out, it's going to be quite a disaster. So it was only a year after the DA was approved that the developer went in without fulfilling their consent conditions and allegedly cleared the land without putting up the fencing, without having the wildlife specialists on site, without protecting the creek for runoff. And that's in the Land and Environment Court now. There was the directions hearing earlier in the month, and that was postponed until more evidence was collected by council, and so that the developer hadn't appointed his legal counsel very early in the piece, and, you know, everybody needed more time. So that'll be back in April, and we'll see what the fine will be, or what the outcome will be, or whether nothing at all will happen. And that's not the only development. There are probably 3 or 4 going on in that area.
Yeah, there's already been clearing in Files Creek Valley, and it's not just coincidental that we did have a picture of a gang there. Well, the gang has disappeared from that area, so there's already been clearing from that. And you know, I'm not sure if it's the gang that likes specific trees. Is it? So if a tree goes, which I think that's the case, then they'll tend to move on, or who knows what. But there is the search on for gangs in Ku-ring-gai and Hornsby.